Welcome back to Armpit Intellectuals. This is the podcast where we deep dive into the pits of knowledge, politics, culture, and identity. I'm Bilal.
And I'm Zara. Thanks for tuning in to the Pits of Knowledge. Today, we're exploring a concept called banal nationalism, as articulated by Michael Billig. We'll look into how everyday nationalism manifests in both established and less established nations, with a special focus on Pakistan.
Billig's idea of banal nationalism is all about the subtle, often unnoticed ways in which national identity is woven into the fabric of daily life. In countries like the UK and the US, the kind of nationalism is embedded in everything from flags and anthems to the way people speak and think about their country.
Billig argues that these banal symbols and practices help to reinforce a sense of national identity without overtly flaunting it. This contrasts sharply with what Billig describes as hot nationalism, which is a more overt, passionate, and often violent form of nationalism.
And that's where it gets really interesting. For less established or new nation states like Pakistan, we see a blend of both hot and banal nationalism. The term hot nationalism can refer to the more aggressive, confrontational aspects of national identity, which can include conflicts and wars, or the obtaining of nuclear arms, as mentioned in one of our previous episodes, and even national celebrations.
Absolutely. Pakistan has seen its fair share of hot nationalism, especially in the context of its historical and ongoing conflicts. The military and its nuclear power is a salient part of its national identity, as we know, and both of those entities are at the forefront of Pakistan's nationhood. But at the same time, Pakistan also engages in practices of
Banal nationalism. Let's start by understanding Billig's framework and the concept of banal nationalism. Banal refers to something so ordinary or boring that you don't consider it twice. According to Billig, banal nationalism involves everyday reinforcement of national identity through mundane symbols and practices. This includes things like the national flag, anthems, and even the way national holidays are celebrated.
and it's not just about the symbols themselves, but also about how these symbols are woven into the daily lives of citizens. In established nation states, such as the nation states of Pakistan and India, these symbols are so embedded that they often go unnoticed. For instance, think about how many times you see Qaid-e-Azam, Gandhi, or the Pakistan or India flag in public spaces, on currency, or even in the media.
I send you my cordial greetings on behalf of the Muslim India, and I feel we have your good wishes. As you know, of the many races, creeds and religions that inhabit the vast subcontinent of India, there are two major nations, the Hindus and Muslims.
Let's apply this to Pakistan. Despite being a nation that experiences significant hot nationalism through its military conflicts, political tensions, nuclear power, and its emphasis on these facets, it also has a rich landscape of banal nationalism.
One vivid example is how Pakistani schools enforce the recitation of the national anthem. It's not just a patriotic exercise, it's a daily ritual that embeds national identity into the students' routine. And interestingly, the anthem is recited in Urdu, but its lyrics have significant Persian influence, highlighting the complex linguistic heritage of Pakistan, but one that is also rooted in a pre partition elitist high culture that wrote in Persian, that is Farsi.
Yeah, that's why people don't consider Habib Jalib as a true poet.
Right, exactly. Not he's not high culture enough
Yeah.
like Iqbal and Fez Ahmed Fez.
Yeah, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. And the nationalist symbols are everywhere in Pakistan. Take Pakola, for instance, the green soda that's marketed as the national drink. Its bright green color aligns with the national flag. I would say more like 1992 World Cup jersey there. And it's a clear example of banal nationalism. It's green, for starters, and its name is derived from Pakistan Cola.
And let's not forget Independence Day celebrations जो अभी हुए थे, but apparently इस साल is a bit of a gloomy year.
Mhm.
In Pakistan, this day is marked by a surge of nationalistic fervor, usually. Streets are filled with flags, people paint their faces green and white, and chants like Pakistan's and the Bad, India Murdabad, which, translate to Long Live Pakistan, Down with India, are common. And it's a powerful example of how nationalism can be both celebratory and antagonistic.
Yeah, but these celebrations are also a way to mask deeper issues. Both Pakistan and India commemorate this separation and the violence of partitions in ways that often gloss over the trauma. This selective memory is key part of what Billig describes as double forgetting, a phenomenon where nations selectively remember and forget aspects of their history to maintain a coherent national identity.
And this process of forgetting is not just about erasing past violence, but also about reinforcing current national narratives. For Pakistan, this means sidelining uncomfortable truths like the violence of the Bangladesh liberation and ongoing discrimination against religious and ethnic minorities. Nationalism seems to trump the state's empathy and accountability when it comes to atrocities it has committed in the name of quote unquote nationhood and patriotism. It adds fuel to the us versus them fire, which contributes to the double forgetting that
Hmm.
Billing refers to, right?
Right.
We forget we were once part of India, like a Siamese twin that was,
Cut off from the other.
yeah.
And like yeah, it's very true that we do celebrate nationalistic ideas or nationalist like history of both the countries, but at the same time we forget what actually happened during the partition and how many people actually suffered. It was you could easily say that there was more than I think like people sometimes consider that the same amount of people died as in world wars that this migration actually took place. So it was just a horror that subcontinent had to see. But nowadays they actually forget the the quote unquote sacrifices. Although those people weren't really going out to sacrifice, they were just the country was split apart and they just had to make a decision and they just left and on the way they were killed or raped or you know so and today what exactly Pakistan's nationalism means is just being anti-India. So I mean there is that trauma that Pakistan doesn't forget, and it keeps building on to his nationalism as what is opposed to whatever India is.
Mhm. For sure, as we discussed in the one of the previous episodes we did
Mm.
about the nuclear testing
Yeah,
and
nuclear
how it
testing. Yeah.
was how Pakistan decided to procure it because India had developed their
Exactly. Yeah.
nuclear arsenal. So
Mm.
that,
So yeah, let's talk about the ethnic minorities. Pakistan has complex ethnic landscape. The quest for a pure Urdu language has led to tensions and violence against groups like Sindhis, Pashtuns, Baloch, and other ethnic groups who themselves have their own nationalist movements going on and whose first language is not Urdu. These issues are often overshadowed by the more dominant nationalist narratives because language matters, and these issues can be portrayed in how each province outside of Punjab, that is the center, are treated in terms of inadequate resources.
and this brings us to another point. When referring to discrimination and inadequate resources, it brings us to gender nationalism. And so the violence against women, especially, Bilal, as you were just mentioning right now in the context of partition
Hmm.
and its aftermath, is rarely discussed openly.
Right.
And nationalist rhetoric often glosses over these issues, focusing instead on glorifying the nation and its military achievements. Women continue to be seen as both symbols of the nation's honor and as well as symbols of the nation's dishonor. That is, they are seen as lesser in society at the same time, and their tenuous domestic labor has been normalized. And this is a separate conversation, but this labor is often invisibilized and disregarded as labor itself. Nor do
Hmm.
nor is there any like kind of like social system in place for women. And I think that is part of the nationalism that goes on. But yeah.
Yeah.
So we've touched upon, I think, minorities, gender, and nationalism, and what other forms of nationalism, banal
Well,
nationalism.
there is sport. So cricket, I mean, which is another example where banal nationalism intersects with hot nationalism.
That's up in the air. He's getting under it. This could be victory. It is. Pakistan win the World Cup. A magnificent performance in front of 87,000.
It's a sport that's deeply embedded in Pakistan's national identity, even though it's not the official national sport. Cricket matches, especially against India, are marked by intense nationalistic fervor. The use of flags, face paints, and chants during these matches reflects a broader nationalistic sentiment. Even the slogan "Bleed Green" is a symbolic of the patriotic martyrdom many feel in the name of sport. So, although this, I think it continues in every sport. I mean, it's not only cricket now. I mean, cricket is, like, you can say, the pinnacle of sports, but
What about the
anywhere,
national sport?
hockey. I mean, at one point they were good, but like, yeah, of course, that's
Squash.
gone. Squash was pretty good. That, there was nowadays this like Arshad Nadeem.
Oh
Everyone
yeah.
is like trying to, like present it as something that's
Sir,
a
ye aapka
very
vision tha.
sorry, aapka aapka yeah,
Yeah, no, definitely. I can definitely see how they're using like, Arshad Nadeem as a symbol of like nationalistic honor and pride.
exactly, yeah.
For sure. Like yeah, that's a great example actually. Great recent example.
Yeah, they're gonna bunch up a lot of Arshad Nadeems and send on, like, as soldiers. नेज़े फेंकने वाले आर्मी में आगे आगे.
And so speaking about the army, the military plays a significant role, no?
Yeah, so I mean, let's talk about it. Like, I mean, we have in one of our previous episodes as well, which is the military industrial complex, which, I mean, we all know that the military plays a significant role in national identity and politics. National symbols and military themes are prevalent in government institutions and public life. This constant reinforcement of military values is a form of banal nationalism that goes beyond mere symbols. I mean, yeah, this is a military industrial complex, but even making people like, you know, martyrs, like, as national heroes is,
Yeah.
I mean, nothing. I mean, those are martyrs, but it's just to amplify the concept of nationalism is basically the putting them as like this pinnacle of, like, hero or whatever in the country.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I can see how, military values from my own personal experience growing up in like a, I guess, bureaucratic military family in Pakistan. Nationalism was both overt and subtle. Like, national symbols were pretty much always present, hyper present, whether it was the national anthem, portraits of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, or the constant emphasis on military heroes. And of course, the Indo-Pak wars were frequently discussed. But generally, I mean, even in school, I'm sure you experience this as well. Like, Jo East Pakistan, what happened, like
Right.
which was
Well, I'm from
basically
the
like,
periphery, so they were actually in support of it.
okay, that's very good. But yeah, like we weren't told about Bangladesh and like,
Right.
the kind of, I guess, murderous sort of
History, yeah.
history, yeah, genocidal history. Even now with the revolution occurring in Bangladesh, right? Like Pakistan obviously has little to say about how this violent history with Bangladesh has contributed to this pivotal moment in current history.
Mhm.
And I guess now living in Canada, a country known for its multiculturalism, I find myself and I'm sure other people as well reflect on, how nationalism manifests differently here, but it's still here. Like, Canada has its own set of banal symbols,
Yeah.
but they're often concealed under this guise of multiculturalism,
Right, yeah, right.
Yeah, sab aa jao,
Sab aa
like.
But they still have this sort of hierarchy, though. When you come in, you see a nationalist sort of touch to Canada, right? the English, the French, the whole
Mm-hmm.
history between the
The
First
colonials.
Nations and the yeah,
Yeah, the colonizers, the colonial
the
history.
colonial
Yeah.
history, the
Yeah.
Canada versus US, what happened with the British, why are they still under British? Like, that's the whole,
Absolutely.
that's a very,
So weird. It's so weird. Yeah, कि monarchy, like, कि तुम्हें, like, you have to, when you're applying for citizenship, you have to pledge allegiance to, like, the
to the
monarchy.
monarchy, yeah.
Yeah, it's so,
Yeah.
so dystopian. But anyway, but yeah, like, I mean, you're sold this idea of the Canadian dream, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is the Canadian? Like, what does it mean to be Canadian? Like, कोई actual में Canadian नहीं है. The only people who are, like, quote unquote Canadian are, like, the indigenous people.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like ज़्यादातर तो लोग, या UK से आए या Ireland, you see a lot of Irish people, like,
Yeah.
जो ancestrally Ireland, या ऐसे
True.
कुछ.
I mean, but you can say that with any of, I mean, you can say that for Pakistan, let's say, for example, right? Like a lot of people came to that area in maybe,
Muhajirs.
no, the Muhajirs, yes, for sure.
Yeah.
But even like before that, like a lot
Yeah.
of people, there was a lot of Central Asian migration, of course, because
Mm.
there was like wars and people were coming in from Iran, from Saudi, from like all over the place, right? So
Mhm.
so there was this. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, when we do deep dive into this idea of nationalism, how can you really say that, just because it is again a really very recent concept. I mean, it came after the French Revolution. I mean, I was like watching another like YouTube video on it.
Mm.
So like it was when the French Revolution came about, that's when nationalism idea came about, right?
Right.
And it was just like basically people living within a certain boundary.
Mhm.
And in that boundary, I mean, you can be coming in from, I mean, you could be from there, you could not be from there. The places like, yeah, like just like example, like Turkey, like Pakistan, like, I don't know, like Latin America, people have moved here like all over like the history, right? So you
Yeah.
don't know who's from where. But of course, today in the modern world, we sort of trace it back to some sort of like
23andme.com.
23andMe, yeah, exactly. And then we come up with this like theories that, yeah, we've been here for this long and this is what it means to be Pakistani. And like,
Yeah, for sure. And like
and
this whole, MQM and shit, like it's
got a little on the
little on the nose.
yeah,
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying for
a little
sure.
MQM, a
A
little
little.
Bori Aman on the side.
No, isn't just like, like that idea ke like, that yeah, we deserve to be here, it's like
Mhm.
ye hamara hak hai, kind
Yeah,
of. And like, I mean, yeah, it's like, this whole
yeah, that's
concept
right.
of
Yeah.
yeah, but it's like जैसे यहाँ like colonize हो गए थे लोग, like it's like तुम colonize तो नहीं कर like करना चाहिए, like you
Yeah.
should like you
I mean,
should
they don't. Sometimes they use the word colonize. Sometimes they use the word settlers. Sometimes
yeah,
they
settler
just
colonialism, yeah, I guess
yeah,
settlers, colonizers. I mean, settler तो like हम settler है technically. We're not colonizers, but we're settlers. Like we've
yeah,
settled here and it's
right,
not really our place.
yeah,
Like हम यहाँ के नहीं हैं.
yeah, yeah,
So we're settlers,
yeah. I mean, yeah,
but
colonizers are the people who just come there and basically change the whole system, right?
yeah,
That's
yeah.
what happened here.
Who just like totally occupy and like kick out the indigenous people, like जो अभी Palestine में जो हो रहा है, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's like settler
So yeah,
colonialism.
I mean, even Palestine, the whole issue about Palestine is about nationalism, right?
Mhm.
Like, I mean, I mean, of course, it's wrong for the people that's happening there, and you cannot like just throw people out from where been staying there for so many of their lives. Not
Yeah,
their lives, but I don't know, their like forefathers have been there.
yeah,
And even the claim that, when people from like, when like people started settling there were like, no, our forefathers also used to live here. We have seen that kind of
Mhm.
rhetoric, but
Mhm.
that's just like, I don't know, you cannot y- you cannot like claim something that was not yours like 500 years ago.
Of course.
So
Yeah, definitely not. Definitely, and not something that was, kind of like taken with violence, like
hmm
violently. Like, how
right,
is that?
yeah,
That's all. Like colonialism is all like kind of like violence
hmm
or like manipulation, I guess. Like jo
manipulation.
East India Company ne jo ki thi, right? Like that was
Yeah, I
pretty
mean they,
manipulative.
yeah, that was pretty manipulative. Yeah, but I wouldn't say because like they didn't settle there. I mean they were colonizers, but they didn't
They
settle
didn't
there.
settle. Yeah, they were settler
We
colonials.
still, I mean, you can still say that we are in under their spell still. Like we're still
Mhm.
running the same systems.
Colonial
We're still
hangover.
colonial hangover exactly. Like
Yeah.
गोरे चले गए बट वो अपने कहते हैं ना अपने उल्लू छोड़ गए हैं whatever पीछे.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. Or hum unke ullu hain.
yeah, good.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, like, even in that sense, right? Like, this persists a lot. So, like, even here, like, they sell you this idea of a dream, like we were saying. But
Mhm.
I think that largely, there's still like xenophobia, of course.
Of
There's,
course,
there's
yeah.
still, यहाँ भी, बहुत चीजें सिफारिश पे चलती हैं, like, and I mean, if you look at Toronto and as an example, and like, GTA, there are a lot of neighborhoods that are kind of segregated based on race,
Right, yeah.
which I find very interesting. And I think that's the way that nationalism persists
I mean, you
even.
see that in Montreal too, no?
Yeah, I
Sort
would
of.
say so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a way that, yeah, like it's like a form of nationalism that does persist across borders. Like,
Mm-hmm.
जैसे like, ब्रैम्पटन में ज्यादा पंजाबी होते हैं, like
Right.
मिल्टन में ज्यादा पाकिस्तानी होते हैं, मिसिसागा में, I guess. But like, there are certain pockets that are more concentrated.
Hmm.
Like people know, okay, like, Etobicoke, like, near Rexdale is like,
Rexdale.
yeah, it's like mostly like, like immigrants from Somalia, like,
Mm-hmm.
it's, I don't know, there's like this thing, like you
There's this
just
thing,
end up
yes, for sure.
knowing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
And
Park X mostly Desis.
exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So,
So yeah, so I mean, mm, like to conclude,
hmm,
Billig's concept of banal nationalism basically helps us understand how national identity is maintained through everyday symbols and practices. I mean, like I think segregation is also one of the practice, I would say, to like
yeah,
avoid
segregation.
segregation of like communities
Right.
in different kind of, because
For
we
sure.
want to stay with our kind of people,
Yeah.
and this area is only going to be for those people who are just in our kind or our community.
Mm.
It's not confined to any one form or location. It's a recurring theme in both established and less established nations. So I would say that even the less established nations have, of course, they've taken on this theory, or you can say, or this idea of nationalism. And they're, of course, going down the same path of what established nations have done. But just to focus on, like, again, like Pakistan and India, again, distorting facts is the main sort of like,
Coded
if,
histories.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Distorting
for
facts is sort of
sure.
like the main sort of like, ingredient of telling what a Pakistani is, what an Indian is, what a Bangladeshi is.
Hmm.
And this, again, like, this has nothing to do with like, like freedom of the people, like nothing to take away from Bangladesh's freedom, or India's freedom as from the British and what happened afterwards, but just what came after was what the recipe for disaster, sort of the
Mm.
fight between the whole subcontinent, and still is sort of derailed in that kind of war mongering, or
Yeah.
in kind just,
Partition was like a nationalist, like a religious nationalist.
yeah, endeavor, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exactly, for sure. Definitely. And it's just, yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah, it's just so interesting. And I think that the concept of, banal nationalism particularly is, as Billing has theorized it, is very interesting in that, it's like it tells you to look at the subtle, right? It's like
Hmm.
obviously hot nationalism, right? As
Yeah.
he just to kind of recap that. So there's hot nationalism and then there's banal nationalism. And obviously hot nationalism is very obvious.
Right.
America में बहुत देखते हैं, like especially, far right, like, Republicans, काफी hot nationalists, you're like, yeah,
Right.
make America great again, like,
Yeah. Exactly.
And we will make America great again. Thank you, Ohio.
And Pakistan mein, as we discussed, like 14 August, India 15 August, whatever
Yeah.
August,
Yeah.
like, it's just, it's interesting, like how it's that's very obvious, but then, yeah, there are these more like quiet, it's like the
Right.
quiet nationalism of the everyday, right?
Exactly.
And yeah, I mean, so I guess, yeah, we've explored how banal nationalism manifests in Pakistan, India as main examples, alongside its more, overt expressions of nationalism, that is hot nationalism. And I guess it's clear that nationalism is a multifaceted phenomenon, right? Like just given these two examples, and it's deeply embedded in both the mundane and the dramatic aspects of national life. So it's like it's so, I guess, powerful in the way that it affects ideology, right? Like, and that it's just, yeah, it's just in all these different ways, quietly and not so quietly, but also it's all like imagined, which I find is the most fascinating part
Yeah.
about nationalism and borders and boundaries, like Benedict Anderson.
It's like it's ingrained into our even studies, right? Like our books,
Park
Park
studies.
studies.
Yeah, for sure.
And like it's there in our speeches. In हम लोग नारे लगाते हैं पाकिस्तान का मतलब क्या,
Yeah.
and like
La ilaha illallah.
yeah, sure. I mean, so I'm just saying, like, these, like, again, like, yeah, what Billy was saying, like the subtle
Yeah.
thing, the subtleness of how soft power sort of, you don't even know how it's working to sort of, like, at the end of the day, yeah, basically creating a rift against you and whoever the other is. And in Pakistan's case, it's mostly India.
Yeah.
I mean, Afghanistan को तो वो अपना backyard समझते हैं. And
Basically.
Iran say they take like this sort of this civilizational like baggage or whatever
Yeah.
they try to say with their connection with Farsi and everything. So and for other places it's different. Like US, it's whatever is not China or whatever is not Canada or whatever is not Mexico. It's the US. It's the exceptionalism of US. It's what Mariah Carey defines. It what Taylor Swift defines.
Oh my God, stop.
I mean, of
Taylor
course,
Swift contributing to climate crisis in unprecedented ways because she has a private jet.
Yeah, for sure.
Celebrities with private jets, get out of here.
Get out of here.
Get out of here. But yeah, no, like, yeah, exactly. Like, it's just how these different symbols kind of represent different nation states.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, yeah, but it's all like imagined, right?
Yeah.
That's what's so fascinating about it, is that it's just all like ideological. Like, none of it actually is real.
No, of course not. It's not real.
I know,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's what's just, I don't know. I find that so interesting to think about.
I mean, that's where we come in when we say that we don't have to just like listen to what your government is saying. You have to go out there and like sort of read and understand your history. Like you have to see how people are distorted.
When I will grow up, I will be army and save Pakistan and destroy India. Strong army, walk!
Like distorting your history basically.
For sure.
And not look at it in just one sense. Like there is always like people's history. So you should always look into what people's histories are as well. And yeah, go from there, I guess. So. Well, thanks everyone. Thank you for joining to another episode and from whatever pits you are listening to.
And of our knowledge.
Yeah. And of our knowledge as well. And we'll catch you next time.